Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Safe Travels podcast. My name is Joey. Today we are at Mesa Verde National Park, and we have a very special guest. His name is Satchel Martin. Satchel is one of the Indigenous Ranger Interns at Mesa Verde, and in our conversation together, we talk all about the cultural significance and ancestral history of this remarkable national park. Satchel, you are a ranger intern here at beautiful Mesa Verde National Park. You've been here for 4 seasons, and you're part of the Hopi Tribe. When we come to Mesa Verde, we hear a lot about the ancestral Puebloans. What exactly does that mean? What does that encompass?
Yeah, so Mesa Verde, you come and visit these places, all the cliff dwellings everyone likes to visit, built by the ancestral Pueblo people, and the ancestors of somebody, and that's going to be our 21 descendant communities. So that's going to be the Hopi in Arizona, where my family's from. That's going to be the 19 Pueblos in New Mexico. And that's also going to be the Pueblo of Isleta del Sur down in Texas near El Paso. And so, 21 descendant communities, but we have a total of 27 associated tribes. So those that aren't going to be those 21 descendant community members are going to be our Navajo or Dene, our Southern Ute, Ute Mountain Ute, the Hickory Apache, and the Mescalero Apache. And these are going to be, you're going to see those names a lot throughout the park because they're all part of the history here. And they're not just descendant members that have an impact on this landscape. When the ancestral Pueblo people migrated to the south in the late 1200s, that's when those stories of the Apache, Ute, Navajo groups come in. This landscape wasn't empty. There's still a lot of human activity happening here, and those stories are those of the Apache, Ute, and Navajo.
In your role as a ranger intern, what do you do inside of the park?
Yeah, so as the intern or ranger intern, I'm given the same responsibilities as all of our rangers here. With the program, we do tours in all our cliff dwellings. We work the museum desk, the visitor center desk. We do ED programs as well. But also we have a little bit extra because of our backgrounds. We're given some more responsibilities, things that we can, with our perspectives, we can offer. In the past, we've been participating in lecture series in local town of Cortez. We've done podcasts before. And we've also participated we have a digital tour of Cliff Palace. And so that's stuff that our supervisors have partitioned time for us to be able to participate in, to contribute with, and also kind of give some career development. We've done a lot of shadowing of other departments. We loved our interpretive department. We're really glad with the work we do, but they've also given us opportunities to just see what else is out there, what's going on under the umbrella of Mesa Verde National Park.
Do you have a passion for spending time and educating visitors who might be unfamiliar with this area, but also, ancestral tribes that have been in the area and the human inhabitants that have done amazing things in this beautiful place?
No, absolutely. It's a lot of, I do find a lot of, it could be oftentimes fun. I find a lot of satisfaction in that, because it's a perspective that I had to be exposed to, because you grow up on Hopi or any of our Pueblos, and it's just part of life, there's the people have been here. And to get out of that and to get other perspectives of people, like this is their first time in Mesa Verde. Sometimes, very often, it's their first time meeting someone who's Native American. A lot of, I don't want to say a lot, but there've been a couple very interesting moments where people admit that they didn't think there was Native American presence anymore in the States. And so it's a lot of instantly satisfying to be able to expose people to this and to have people's worldview change, with just like, we're still here, but also have been here for a very long time. It's very satisfying to be able to help people start that journey, to expose them to this history.
I think it's a pretty natural human feeling that if you're unfamiliar with a story such as Native American history or indigenous history, that you kind of avoid it and you're just here seeing beautiful structures and you don't confront your maybe lack of education in that area. Do you encourage folks that may feel that way, intimidated to ask questions, do you encourage them to ask you questions and to dive into the history and education?
Absolutely. When it comes to being on these tours, it's a big part of me to like introduce myself, but also introduce myself as someone that they can ask these questions to, because it's no doubt very intimidating to be inundated, to be hit with all this information. Even with a background, my first time going on these tours, as a visitor, was definitely a lot of moments of like, wow, this is a lot. I don't even know where to begin. But I definitely being here is part of that responsibility. I understand, is just to be able and open to those questions. I don't want anyone to be embarrassed or ashamed or intimidated when it comes to asking or just wanting to learn. There's no shame in wanting to learn, and it's a big undertaking to confront maybe your deficiency in an understanding of a subject. I mean, regardless whether you're Mesa Verde or not. So you're never too old to learn, but that shouldn't stop you.
And I think when you learn about the culture and the heritage of this area, it enhances your experience so much. And I think gives you so much reverence when you see these beautiful dwellings and structures and artifacts in the park. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. Building that reverence. And I think asking those questions, building that context is very important, because people do travel across the country and across the globe to come to Cliff Palace. And that might just be like, we're here to see Cliff Palace. We're just checking a box on our journey. We're here because Cliff Palace is here. But coming in and kind of breaking that shell and getting more exposure to, it's not just Cliff Palace and it's not just the cliff dwellings that you can find here. It really builds it. It really enhances your experience. And with reverence, sometimes it can become very obvious, being in Cliff Palace, like you got to have that when you're in these spaces. We want to build that out to when people visit places that are not going to be as perfectly preserved or excavated. And it's not just being out in the landscape. You gotta come with that reverence, come with that mindset, because that human history is going to be out here. And it may not make itself obvious, but you will be here walking through villages without even knowing sometimes.
You mentioned growing up and still a part of Hopi Tribe in Arizona, and growing up with learnings of the Hopi Tribe from your family. Did you learn about Mesa Verde when you were a kid, and was that a part of the stories that you dove into with your family? Yeah.
So something important to talk about is that for Hopi, and I can confidently say for a lot of our other pueblos, Mesa Verde is just one part of our history. I don't want to downplay the significance of Mesa Verde. Lessons learned here are still being taught today. But like, when we refer to Mesa Verde as a place, we're not just talking about the national park. Mesa Verde is a region. It's a cultural place that extends from like Chimney Rock National Monument near Pagosa Springs to as far west as Bears Ears. It's a very big place. And so that's a very big part of our culture and our history. For Hopi, when we emerged, we split. Our different clans went north, south, east, and west to learn different things, to become better stewards of the land. And so Mesa Verde is a very significant part of our traditions and our history. But we were also in places where the name Ancestral Pueblo extends out. Places like Chaco Canyon, places like Wapatki in Arizona, and into Mexico as well. Mesa Verde is still a very significant part. We've been all over, but Mesa Verde is a very important part of our history.
One thing I really like that you said off camera before we sat down to do this podcast is Ancestral Puebloans can be a bit confusing because Ancestral makes it seem like it's not alive today, but the culture is very much alive today. And so how is that practiced in your family and in your household?
Yeah. So yeah, that culture being alive it's very strong. There's of course there is a gap in time between Mesa Verde and where we are today, and then a lot occurred. A lot of interactions with, first it was the Spanish, and then the Mexican government, and then the American government, and there's a lot of history there. And I know a lot of what is we look towards is the what our ancestors faced, is like because they were able to do this, we can do what we're facing now. Because our great grandmother went to the boarding schools, we can see how she had that strength, and we can continue because we know that our ancestors here went through an incredibly terrible drought, and we're able to make these difficult decisions. We can continue, we can persevere. It's, times are difficult, on personal levels, and then on the long-term scale for us on Hopi, but because of what our ancestors were able to do, what they were able to handle, then that means that it's within us to be able to continue, not just surviving, but also with the culture. Important things like language and our traditions, got some of it started here within the region, and it still continues. Patterns and designs within artwork are going to be coming from this region, and it just exists. Even if I did not know it at the time, like I'm familiar with the designs that we see within our pottery today. And it's just not confined to my household. When I think of being back home, it's going to be my village. It's going to be all of Hopi. It's just not, even now, even back then, it wasn't just like insular. It wasn't just family units. It's all communities. And sometimes we've got to remember those lessons of just like, we can depend on others, but also maybe most importantly, we need to be dependable as well.
You mentioned the lessons and inspiration that you get from your great grandmother or other stories that you hear from your family lineage. And you come to Mesa Verde, and you come here often because you work here.
Yeah.
And you see these incredible cliff structures, and the amount of skill, work, and technical ability people had to build these. Does that inspire you to see how far Hopi and other pueblos have come, in this world?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely maybe two parts to this is seeing of course the perseverance, to still have our cultures, have them be strong, and to have our presence here in the Southwest. There's some Pueblo groups and other tribes that are not here today, and it's for us. It's not luck. We have a lot of hard work, a lot of sacrifice to be able to get to this point. And so to be in a place like Cliff Palace is like, when they were saying goodbye to these homes, they were making that decision not just for themselves and their kids, but they're making for generations that they would not meet. And so they'll talk about the decisions being made here have impacts today, is that's why we're here, is because of what those hard decisions that our ancestors made in these various tumultuous times. And another point of inspiration is going to be coming from, we have a lot of descendant community groups come visit, individuals, but also more organized with school groups or actual tribal governments. And for me, talking about inspiration to be found within these cliff dwellings reminds me of, a school group from Laguna. It's elementary kids, and we were in a place called Longhouse. And their chaperones and their teachers, and they had some of their elders there with them, and we sat down in our plaza, and one of the elders was talking, and she said, "Look around you." And basically what she's saying is our ancestors are artists, they are architects and engineers, and that is all stuff that they were able to figure out 700 years ago. And so now, talking to those kids, you were young, you can still learn these lessons. It's not too early. It's not too late. Because our ancestors were able to build these towers, you can be an engineer. Because our ancestors made this pottery, you can be artists. And so that's really for me, being not a kid, was still sitting there listening like, yeah, that's incredible. That's what's important. These things, like, they didn't, like, now we have, it can feel like a barrier. I know it's a big barrier for our communities to go to higher education and things like that, but our ancestors could do that. And so we can too.
That's really powerful. Yeah. One thing that I also think is a lost art in today's world, but not by Hopi or other Pueblos, is the connection to land. We talk about trades and structures and how incredible those are, but another big lesson that we can learn is how connected we are to the landscape, trees, to the soil that we're walking on. What are some of those lessons and stories that you've learned about this region, this park, and of course your tribe, about how connected we are to this landscape?
Yeah. So it's like, talking about the land, like, at least I know for like a big part that maybe people don't think about is going to be like with agriculture. For Hopi and other Pueblos, it's dryland agriculture. And because of this, we know that it was the same here with the Mesa Verde. And so a lot of the trials and the difficulties that we have today, we think would have applied here as well. And part of it is like knowing your landscape is knowing where to gather your food, where to hunt, but also where to plant. And so it's a whole different type of agriculture out here. We don't have that modern irrigation systems. We don't pump for that water. We don't have systems to bring the water out to us. It's all going to be coming from precipitation. It's rainfall and it's snow melt. And from season to season, it's not going to be the same. And so not just where the rain will fall, but also when going out to your fields, a big important thing is you need to know where that moisture already is. When the snow melts, where does it collect? So you got to know the land, you got to know the contours, you got to know the geology about like where does water like to form. And then it changes from season to season. So you go there and like, okay, use that water, it needs to recharge. The soil needs to, gain that nutrients back again. So we got to go somewhere else. And so up here, we talk about the mesa tops. It wouldn't have been big fields of corn like we see like in our Midwest. It would have been more spread out. And then you go out, you see these fields might go fallow, but that's not wasting that time. That's not wasting the space. It's necessary for that landscape to be able to rejuvenate. And so I think knowing your land, of course, is going to be, where do we get this food? But also, where do we get this material? Where do we get our clays? Where do we get our adobe? Where's the best place to collect stone? It's going to be all of this together. And it's also the understanding that you might need to let it rest. You might need to rest for a long time before you go back. We know that we have our renewable resources, but also we have our non-renewables. You got to take the renewables in a way that doesn't damage it. It doesn't leave it irreversibly harmed. And then also with our non-renewables, you got to be smart with what you got. You got to make these things last. You can only pull so much clay from an area before you got to move on. You can only pull so much stone from a landscape before it's changed, before you change the geology. And so knowing the landscape is not only where to find your materials, but also when is it enough? You got to know when you can let it rest.
You say you got to know when to let it rest. I like that you say that, because I was reading and learning about how tribes would leave certain areas, let it rest, and then come back.
Yeah.
What is that process like? What does let it rest? It sounds obvious, but what does let it rest mean?
So it's kind of different. I know like a lot of that literature of coming and going is definitely focused on more nomadic tribes. So it's going to be like season to season. You go, you have a place for winter, a place for summer. But that still occurred within Mesa Verde and the Pueblo world. It's going to be on a bigger time scale, but it's definitely within our even historical times of we got to go someplace. Maybe your spraying, you use it too much or in conjunction with the drought, so you got to go. So that movement is still a part of the Hopi and Pueblo world, but it just looks very different than some of our tribes to the north or in the plains. We're not going every season. It's just going to be us reacting to environmental concerns. That's what happened here with Mesa Verde. Living on mesa tops, people did move into the cliff sides. Some of these cliff dwellings are going to be beautiful places to be in the summer, but difficult places to be in the winter just because of sunlight. Yeah, I mean, you're not getting enough. So sometimes people propose the idea of maybe it's more of a seasonal place. Once the winter time hits, you move up onto the mesa top. But then also that migration to the south. That's going to be, we say migration because at least with Hopi is, well, I say confidently for Hopi and other Pueblos is that journey. We were searching for something. We were searching for a middle place. So I don't know if we emerged and we went out. All of us, all our different clans went to different areas to look for that place where we could become again as Hopi. And so we went to these places and then it was time to go. And the land rests. And because we don't live in these landscapes permanently anymore, does not mean that we still don't visit. And so when it's time to harvest plants for different purposes, these areas were able to come and grow back. And so it's not the season by season as other tribes, but we're still in our minds letting these places rest. And it applies to the homes too. We've got to let them rest.
Using your resources, your renewable and non-renewable resources in a responsible and respectful way. In what other ways, spiritually, are you connected to the landscape and be able to respect the trees and the landscape that you coexist with? I find that behavior of coexisting with the landscape and with every little movement and everything that you do, a really special thing to learn about.
Yeah. So because it goes hand in hand. Like these places have that spirit or energy, and it's maybe obvious. Like the animals, of course. I think of course animals. Some people like it's the plants as well, but also what I've been referred to by as the non-living relatives. It's still very important. Like every stone laid in Cliff Palace, there's a lot of intention behind it. You're taking this material from a place where it laid for millions of years and you're repurposing it and you're putting it into your home. Is you still got to have the respect for it, that material, because you don't want to be wasteful, of course. And you're asking a lot of all this to be able to you are now a part of my home and I need you to last for as long as I live here. And we see here that they've been lasting for far beyond the occupation of Mesa Verde. We have to have a lot of respect for what is living and what is not living, because we're asking a lot of them to help us. Sometimes we're taking the life of an animal so that we may consume it. We're taking the life of a tree so that we may use it for our buildings. And we're also taking from the earth. We're taking clay, we're taking stone, and we're asking, thank you for allowing us to do this. We're not going to disrespect the material given us. It's going to live proudly in the spaces that we construct. It's going to live proudly as a piece of pottery or a piece of jewelry. So their respect is not just confined to what lives and what breathes.
I did a podcast at Redwood National Park, and we were talking about culture in the area, and I met with a tribal member there, and they had mentioned that when they go on a hike, they can see which trees were cut down by their ancestors and which trees were cut down by chainsaw from logging that's occurred there. Whenever they see a tree that's cut down by an ancestor of theirs, they feel a sense of pride and reverence and spend time with that tree. Do you have similar feelings when you come to Mesa Verde and see structures and artifacts that were built or constructed by your ancestors?
Yeah. Definitely. It's like once you understand like like constructing a home, or like, I guess even, yeah, cutting down a tree. So out here, chainsaws, even like a metal axe. It's still a lot of effort to go out there. Chainsaws make it easier. It's the motor's doing a lot of the work, but you still got to be smart about where you're landing it and things like that. A metal axe, chipping away at it, it's a lot more effort, but it's a metal tool. And then when you go into these cliff dwellings, you see the vigas, the beams of wood, and the ends of them are looking, as you can see, like it's a stone tool. That's a stone axe cutting into that tree, and it's I can't imagine the effort required to not even cut down a tree. You have to start with creating your tool. It's all sandstone here within Mesa Verde. The people here would have to travel to the river bottoms to get those harder stones, those igneous and metamorphic rocks. And from where we are, like in the headquarters or even Cliff Palace, it's going to be 4 or 5 miles walk down the cliffside, down the canyon bottoms. And just to get that stone, bring it back, and then you have to start shaping it, like stone on stone grinding. It's intense. It's just the build up. You're not even cutting the tree yet. And then that's just for one beam of wood. And you look throughout like Cliff Palace or Balcony House, and you see how many pieces of wood there are within these spaces, and that's just what survived. It's incredible, that effort that's required. It's just so much like what's required, that effort. It shows the intentionality, the dedication. It shows there's a lot of love when it comes to building a home. And then even on the scale of to making the tools is monumentous. Coming out and not even just finding like an arrowhead, even just finding evidence, like all the flakes. It's like you can see that someone sat here and they spent a long time. It's not just the time they spent napping the stone. It's going to be all the years before this where they were learning, where they're being taught. It goes back to when they were a kid being taught how to use these tools. And it's all of that is built up. It's going to be generations of knowledge being passed down. It's just, it could be overwhelming.
You mentioned earlier in the podcast the harsh reality, and it is reality, of indigenous tribes and different governments that have existed in this area, including the American government. Over the last decade plus, the National Park Service in particular has made an effort to work with indigenous tribes and people who have existed in these places for a long time, largely because nobody knows this landscape better than you do. And the best land managers for these natural landscapes are the people who have existed here since time immemorial. How has that made you feel to see Native tribes actively participate in the National Park Service and protecting these places and preserving them for the long haul?
It's really something. I really enjoy seeing it. I visit other parks, and there are places where like Hopi, we don't have any presence there, but to be able to see those other tribes and to be introduced is really, it's really nice. I think it's an incredible visitor experience to be able to have that history. And to be able to challenge, like we have natural parks and cultural parks and things like that, just to challenge they're all still cultural regardless, is I think nothing but a benefit to visitors to be able to come into these spaces to get to learn about the trees and the plants and the geology, but also learn about that cultural history. Like, how were these plants used? How are these landscapes navigated? I think is just important, because we come to these spaces and we want to learn as much as we can. If it's the Grand Canyon or Yellowstone, we as visitors come and sometimes we're coming in with nothing. We want to know as much as we can. And then more locally here for Mesa Verde, it's incredible. I visited here when I was maybe 6 or 7 and did not make that connection that this is the place that we talk about back home, that this is where our ancestral ties are. And just to see that change is incredible, because I think about all these kids that come through here, native or not. It's just I was there, and they're getting, and then and they're getting a more enhanced experience than I did. And for our indigenous groups, it's like now there's no doubt for them, what these spaces mean. They can come here and they can understand like this is Ancestral Pueblo. I think it's really important and incredible to see, not just for Native peoples, but I think for all of us.
When you're giving the tours to visitors that are coming to the park at these structures, what are some of the common questions that you get from folks that might know a little bit about Indigenous history and culture? And then, of course, some people who are brand new to this type of education in this environment.
Yeah. Common questions is definitely, for some maybe more informed, is like who are the tribes here? Who lived here? I like to hear that one. Other ones are going to be kind of like, how do they get here? Why do they live here? What do they eat? The basic one, like I think very, very common questions, regardless of where you go, of like, who were they? What do they eat? How do they live? I think is regardless of where we are, we want to know these things. And then maybe for more specifics about Mesa Verde is like, why did they live in the cliffs? Other questions of like, where are their water? How do they get water? And like more, and then within the spaces of asking, the big ones like, what are these rooms? What are these pits in the village? And they're referring to kivas. So I think these are gonna be the most common ones. Others of like a lot of the kids like to ask is like, oh, what pets do they have? What did kids do? Did they play? I like those questions a lot too.
What are the answers to those?
Oh, yeah. Kids, it's I think any archaeologist would agree is that like it often get overlooked when we're looking to our past. But kids are kids, getting in trouble, playing, things like that, getting responsibilities, chores and things like that. But yeah, you could definitely imagine like kids running around the mesas, running a little too close to the edge, and their parents freaking out, yelling at them to get back. Playing with the pets, turkeys and dogs were out here. These were the domesticated animals. So I can imagine kid accidentally letting a turkey out, or getting your puppy and go running around causing trouble up and down the canyons. And we'd also know like a lot of kids play is also just kind of getting started for adult responsibilities. We have in our collections examples of pottery we believe to be made by kids just because they're small, they're a little more rough. But it's definitely kids play is mimicking what their parents do.
Has your work and experience here been educating visitors? Has it sharpened your knowledge and understanding of this landscape and your ancestors?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely, I come from that traditional perspective of like, this is where we were, this is what happened. But being here gives me more like a multidisciplinary understanding of this place now, because I've had opportunities to interact with our people who work in natural resources and cultural resources. I can understand more about like, well, this is the plant and it's related to this plant, or like, I don't know, I can identify flowers that we do not have back home. I can understand like, oh, this is incredible. We have these very rare and endangered flowers out here. And I'm like, oh, now I can appreciate it much more than just how pretty this flower is. And then also like kind of more technical stuff, is we're not as concerned back home about like, well, in CE 500, this occurred. But now it's like, oh, I can do that. I can be like, oh, there's this 100-year gap here between this village and this village. Whereas it's just kind of like, I know this is older and this is going to be a little bit newer. But now I can actually be pretty granular with like what I know. And I definitely get teased for that. Like, oh, you're turning into an archaeologist back home. But it's really cool to be able to be out here. And just being on the landscape, because this is different than home. There's similarities, but it is different being able to be out here and understand like there's more varieties of certain plants, or there's a bigger density of this type of population of deer. I've learned a lot here.
You mentioned you get teased at home, but
Yeah.
I can imagine how proud your family is of you telling your family and your ancestors' story to people who may or may not know about it. Do you talk about that with your family? Are you able to connect with them that way and the stories that you're able to share with people?
Yeah, I definitely, I get a lot of support back home from my immediate family, but also all my extended relatives within, like my clans and stuff. And it's great opportunity because, being able to talk back home is like, I'm asking questions I would not have asked 4 years ago about like our heritage, talking with my uncles and aunts about these types of things is really helping me out understand my role as a member of the Hopi tribe. But also there's been some fun opportunities where like I've been asked questions, and it's definitely not a scenario that I would thought I would be in, where it's like, these are my people who've taught me much, those aunts and uncles, asking me questions about Mesa Verde, and it's a big just a role reversal that I've still find strange sometimes, where it's like, oh, I can answer that. Yeah.
You and I grew up 35 miles away from each other
Yes.
in Arizona,
Yeah.
which is pretty remarkable that we're sitting here
Yeah.
talking about your culture and ancestry dating back here to Mesa Verde. And I can't help but think about how in everyday life when we're growing up, we're around people with such diverse and important backgrounds that we could learn about. And so for us to be sitting here and talking to each other and having this conversation and learning about each other is so unique. And I really bring that up to encourage folks that when they're here, you don't know who's your neighbor, and you don't know their ancestry and what brought them here. And so, I can't stress enough to, if they find somebody here that they can learn and educate themselves about this place, how important that is. And I guess that leads me to the question of like, when a visitor comes here, how would you recommend they spend their time learning about this place, and how can they respect it?
Yeah. It's a lot. It's if you're coming fresh in, it's like there's so much to get caught up on. And I think like if I'm down at the visitor center and someone asks me where do I start and where do I begin, I tell them head straight to the south. Enjoy the views. If you're driving, keep your eyes on the road. Enjoy the road, this landscape, because even if in the north we don't see cliff dwellings or anything like that, you can still appreciate this landscape for both its natural beauty, but also an understanding that like people were still living there, things were still happening out there. That landscape is still has a value. People don't just laser focus in on going to Cliff Palace. Spend time in the north and make your way to the south end of the park and come to the museum. It's a lot going through development right now, depending on when you're listening to this. We're going through a process of basically modernizing the exhibits. Depending who you ask, might be controversial, but we have the first museum in the park system, and it's really old. It's really something incredible to be in the space, but also we have to understand that just same as how interpretation has changed, so has the museums. Some of the stuff is just out of date. Archaeologists, descending community members, curators agree that some of it's just out of date. So just bear in mind, there's still incredible things to see and learn within the space. Our brand new park film, Footprints of Our Ancestors, I definitely think you should watch. It helps build that context. We're not just a historical park, we're also a cultural one, and that's a good place to be. You can visit at our overlooks for Spruce Tree House. Maybe that'll be your first glimpse at a cliff dwelling. And then go out. We have our Mesa Top Loop. We have our Cliff Palace Loop. That's where you can see the big names like Balcony House and Cliff Palace, Square Tower House. But also it's going to be a place where you can see that time, people, the evolution on the landscape. You're going to be able to visit pit houses and villages and see cliff dwellings that are going to be dozens and dozens of cliff dwellings. They're not all going to be a cliff palace, but that does not mean that doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to make a connection and still be able to see something beautiful. And we're also, this season, Weatherall Mesa has been open. You can visit out there. You can see Longhouse and Step House, Kodak House. There's just an incredible density here. People have been living in here in this landscape, calling it home for hundreds and thousands of years. And when you're here standing within the park, you can really feel that. You can really see just what this place meant, but still means for members of this community.
I do want to talk about a little bit about respect when you do come to this place, because it is a living, breathing place. And like you mentioned, every little resource that's put into these structures has reverence and importance. When you do the tours and you actually go down into the structures, what are ways visitors can be respectful and pay homage to what they're looking at and what they're experiencing?
Yeah, so I think we talk about visiting with respect. A very big part of that is remembering that these places are still homes. Cliff Palace, the name is a misnomer. There weren't any kings or queens or any type of royalty there. So we always remind people, like, you are going to be entering and visiting a home. Please treat it like anyone else's home. You go to your neighbors, you're not going to be running up and down their halls and jumping on their beds or anything like that. So when we're in Cliff Palace and Balcony House and these spaces, like, please just have that same level of respect. And then also on top of this is just going to be the fact that it's incredibly old. Like, I've always stressed, like, how lucky we are to be able to be in these cliff dwellings, because they are very delicate, they're very fragile, and it's a testament to the Ancestral Pueblo's engineering that they're able to survive these 700 plus years. And for us to be able to go into these spaces is incredible, but we also have to be very careful. We don't want any leaning or touching or standing or sitting of any type on this architecture, because as archaeologists have mentioned before, once you destroy this resource, you can't get it back. You just can't. It's going to be altered. It's going to be changed. It could be destroyed for good if we're not careful in these spaces. And that's not discouraging anybody from not visiting, but when we're in these spaces, we have to be remembering this is a home. This is a very old home. And also for a lot of community members, these places are still alive. These are still places that we come to. These are still places that we visit. This is not home now, but we can still visit. And you don't have to be a member of the descendant community to understand that places like Cliff Palace, that places like Mesa Verde are very beautiful. They are places with a lot of history, and they are places that deserve a lot of our respect. That we come to these spaces and that we are visitors. This is not our home. We can feel comfortable, we can feel connected, but we should also understand that we are just guests, that we are visiting, and we're very lucky. But we should still show the same respect to whether it is Cliff Palace or it's going to be a single pit house. We have to show that same level of respect, because we call them pit houses, we call them cliff dwellings, we call them villages, but the people, they called them home.
From some of your answers, it seems like Mesa Verde is the jumping off point to a lot of the culture that we've seen in the Southwest and indigenous culture. What is your take on that?
When you come to Mesa Verde, we're looking at the past, and you can talk to, like, archaeology a lot of time is just like, they reach a point in your research, like, I want to know, like, why did they do this? Why did they construct that? What was this used for? Or even just, I want to hear, like, what did they say, the people, the language. And Mesa Verde has the big benefit if you can kind of have that with our descendant communities. There's going to be our pueblos and villages. There are spaces, there are times of the year where the public can come. We have the feast days in New Mexico. These are explicitly open for non-tribal members to come visit. And it's encouraged, but please, keep that same respect. The same respect you have for Mesa Verde, please keep that with our descendant community members. But while you're there, you can imagine what these places would have looked like in their occupation. You can hear the languages being spoken. You can hear the song, the dance, the ceremony. You can imagine these places in their prime once more. You can start to imagine the people that called it home, the kids, and you can start to repopulate all that noise and that activity. The culture is still very strong. The languages is still being taught today. I have nieces and nephews that speak better Hopi than I do, and I'm really happy that that's still occurring. So at Mesa Verde, don't just confine yourself to the past. Start looking towards the present and the future.
As we begin to wrap this podcast up, you mentioned that you have learned lessons from your ancestors, your family and other pueblos and tribes have learned lessons from your ancestors, and you're still learning those lessons. What lesson can a visitor that come here, what can they take away from visiting here and apply to their own life?
Yeah. What can you learn here at Mesa Verde? It's going to be a lot, but I think one of the big lessons is going to be that respect. I think it's going to be, how do you visit a place and give it the respect that it deserves? And I think it's just like treating these places as not just a ruin. You don't treat these places as something just stuck in time. You got to view it with its entire context as best you can. I say, like, in a Western way, we view things as products. We look at, like, this is it, this is what it is, this is what we're going to use it for. But we're trying to challenge that, and I've been challenged about that, is viewing it as just everything in its totality, meaning like Cliff Palace is built up, okay, here it is, 150 plus rooms, but also got to think about, okay, well, what were these rooms used for? The construction itself, like who laid these stones, what were their intentions when they were building these spaces? Talking about tools again, like what effort was required to make their tools to construct this space. And it's something that I take with me when I visit other spaces, other museums or other heritage sites, is I'm trying to think about, like, okay, I'm looking at some pioneer's axe, but it's more than just the object. How many trees were felled with that object? How many times did that handle have to be replaced? Who called that axe their own? Is this an heirloom? Was this from father to son? Or was this, something that was bought? What's the history behind this? What's the story? And it's going to be very small, like a single bead at the museum, or something as big and as grand as Cliff Palace. I think you got to challenge yourself. You got to think about more than just what you're looking at. You got to think about the hands that touched it, the hands that built it, the lives that were lived in these spaces. And I think that's something you can nurture here and then take with you wherever you find yourself.
I agree. Satchel, this has been a special conversation, and you're a very gifted storyteller. So thank you for giving me the time to chat about this amazing place.
Thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be able to talk about these spaces like this.
Thanks for checking out this edition of the Safe Travels podcast. I really hope you enjoyed it. Satchel is absolutely remarkable, and I'm so thankful that we had the opportunity to sit down and chat with him. So if you like this type of content, it would mean a whole lot to me if you liked, commented, and subscribed. And until next time, safe travels.